right, we'll have our presentation right now for academic recovery.
We okay this distance from the mic, Ryan?
Yeah.
Right around here. Thank you. We're going to be talking about elementary summer intervention program. I'll start by discussing sort of the Reader's Digest quick overview, beginning with the end in mind, and then we're getting into the details. So first, to begin, we are talking about a 4-week, half-day summer program from July 26th through August 19th. That's a Monday through Thursday. We're looking at ELA and math instruction. We're targeting selected elementary school students. And this does incorporate some PD for teachers. So that's kind of the overview, what we're going to be discussing here.
Right, as Jeff mentioned, that fourth bullet talks about how we're targeting select students. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of overview of the data that kind of shows how we chose to target the students that we're going to target for the program. So what you're looking at on the screen is our reading results from our FAST data. Now we have lots of other measures that we've been using to assess where our kids are, but FAST is something, it's a national program where other students across the country are taking it. They have national benchmarks and we can kind of compare our kids to other students who are using the FAST program. So on the left-hand side is the early reading assessment. And students in kindergarten and grade 1 take that assessment. And we put up the grade 1 there to show you and highlight how the students are performing in that. So all these graphs that I'm going to show you are set up the same way. So if you look at that black line there, that's the benchmark. That's the goal line nationally where they say students should score this amount. And if they're at this level or point in time, by the end of the year, they will have met the grade level standards. So what you really want to be ideally is above that line. You would say they call that in FAST as low risk students, not at grade level, but low risk. And then below the line, if you're looking at it, the light pink is students who have some risk, who typically, when we're looking at our schools and we use these for benchmarks, those are students that we really want to pay attention to. We might give a little extra support in the classroom, but they're really close to being on target with just a little boost, they could get to the benchmark. And then if you look at the bottom, the ones in the darker pink, those are the students that we would call at-risk students. And those are the students that typically in a typical school year, non-COVID year, those students we would want to see a reading teacher for some intensive intervention. So that's kind of how the graphs are and the color coding of the graph. Now, if you look at the left-hand bar, that is pre-COVID, fall of 2019 when our students arrived in school. And then the next bar next to that is right before COVID hit. We had a benchmark right at the middle of February, end of June, early February, right before COVID. And then when you look, the third bar in the graphs are always going to be the fall of when the students return to school. And then the fourth bar that's on there is when the students took the assessment in the winter, which again was in January and February, right? So that's kind of how the graphs work. So if you look at the left-hand side of that, that's saying that these are not obviously the same first graders. So it was the first graders before, so you could get a typical idea of where our first graders usually fall and then where they were this year as a result of that COVID interruption.
Just for clarification, right? If we just look at the left grid, the 19's really the 1920 school year, right? And so the first two bars are showing you the assessments in the 1920 school year. And the second two are showing you the two assessment points in the 2021 school year. Does everybody follow that?
Yeah, so it's almost like pre-COVID.
So even though I just don't want people to be fooled by this and think this is like the month of for 20. This is the 1920 school year, 1920 winter, 2021 fall, 2021 winter.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just so everybody gets that.
Yes, and FAST has, I don't know why they have the 1, 2, 3, 4 in front of them, but yes, thank you. That sums that up. So if you look at our first grade students, last year in the winter, the students who were in first grades had 38% who were above benchmark. If you look at in the fall, when we came back, That's a little concerning. And remember, these kids were kindergartners when they left in the spring. And last year, our virtual program was nowhere near as robust as it is right now. And we were using packets. So in the fall, you'll look and you'll see that 23% of them were considered above benchmark. And since we've been back in school and we've been back in 5 days week working with the students, they are now up to 29% proficiency. So improvement, but still not to the levels that they were pre-COVID there. There is some learning loss in first grade, and that's what we're noticing across the country, is a lot of the first graders have not yet achieved the reading level that you would expect to at this time of year. So looking over at the next graph, which is grade 2 to 5 reading, and that one's kind of interesting because a lot of the students who were assessed in that pre-COVID time that we looked at are also assessed in the post-COVID. So because it's a range of 2 through 5, some of those same students are in there. So it's really interesting to look at. So when the students left with the after COVID, I would say hit, and we had the COVID disruption, when they left the school, they were at 59% efficiency for reading level. And coming back in the fall was 50%. And now again, working, we've almost back up to where that percentage was. So really good gains that we've seen. And it's interesting to note, if you break this out by grade, and I didn't want to do that because we could go and spend hours and hours on hours looking at data. Most of that, the loss there is due to the second graders. So when you look at that again, think about the second graders were first graders. And so they were just starting to be at that point where they really accelerate with their reading. And then they went out and they were working with packets, and packets don't teach kids how to read. So that's the learning loss. If you took second grade out of there, our kids are actually doing better than they had previously, which is
And
interesting.
this includes the students who participated in the assessments who were at home.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
So this does include the students who are, who have been completely virtual this year.
Is the benchmark, is that a reading level, or is that like a?
It's a score that FAST designates for they've been administering this assessment for many years. So it's just based on their historical data saying the students need to reach this set point in order to have mastery.
50 above, 50 below, or is there some sort of like?
No, it's set on national levels with the national norms that you would have. So the benchmark is set at a certain norm by FAST. So looking at it, if you think of like I'm going to go with Jeff with the norm curve.
That to a grade level reading ability?
It's not a set thing that you could look at and say, no, it's not. It's really not set at a grade level ability. It's just it's a FAST standard score that you would expect them to hit. If you look at the bell curve to hit a certain amount of achievement.
Like a percentile.
Yes,
So
that's a
I-
percentile.
So, and
ranking,
I think
yes.
maybe even to answer the question, ideally, you want everybody above that,
Yes.
correct?
So pre-COVID, we had almost 2/3 below where they should.
Well,
be.
again, I don't want you to think of it as below because it's measuring risk.
It's where
So-
they're starting when they come in to learn how to read, remember?
Yeah.
So like if you're looking at that first grade, you're looking at their first year learning. So at the fall, you see where they usually start, and then you see where the goal is to move that group to, right?
Yeah.
So
And
that-
they usually, it's a benchmark to predict risk. So the students above are low risk. And then if you're looking at the little pink, it's some risk. And then the red is at risk.
and
So-
the expectations for the child through the course of the year increases as well.
Yes.
So it's not
exactly.
flat. So in other words, what the expectation is for the baseline is actually higher in the winter than it is in the fall.
Right, so, and then looking at that, you can see for the first graders as well, talking about that at-risk number, there are many more first graders who are at risk right now than previous to COVID. Okay, so that's the reading side of it. The math graph is set up exactly the same way. If you think about the left two are last school year and the right two bars are this school year. And you can see again in math, the first graders had a slump when they came back and a learning gap. And you can see that through working with their teachers 5 days a week, they're actually above where they were when they left. I want to attribute that to the work that teachers did over in June. They worked on developing a scope and sequence, which was really quite amazing where they went and they knew what the students missed in the spring. And then they went in and gave the students that knowledge right before they were going to teach something that built off of it. So it's not like we went and said, okay, the first month of school, we're going to review everything they missed in first grade. We went through it and did it targeted so that when they came in, we taught something and reviewed it, and then we learned the thing in second grade that built off of it. And we taught something, reviewed it, and then we learned what in second grade built off of it. So it was really intensive intervention, like right before they started the unit that was on their grade level. So, and you can see that that really paid off in the area of math.
And one thing to think about, I mean, if you just looking at the first grade graphs, if you look at the winter under first grade, then you look at the winter, the fourth graph over, what you see is that even though we lost a part of a school year for those kids, because you're comparing kindergartners, right, last year to the last class of first graders, but you see that increase. That's with that time lost in class that they caught up and moved ahead.
Yeah, so it was really a rapid acceleration for kids in the area of math, which is interesting because that's exactly opposite of what FAST, when they did a national study looking to try and determine the COVID loss, they actually found that students slid more in math than they did in reading, which is the exact opposite of what we have, which is why it's really important for us to look at our data and not go with any data from any other place, because it's specific really to our situation. So much the same thing if you look at our second through fifth grade math. When the students left last spring, they were at 63% proficiency, and then they went into the COVID remote learning that we had last spring, came back to school, lost some of that at 56% proficiency, and now they're at 64% proficiency for math. So again, we've recouped that learning loss from last spring and added a little bit to it.
And if you just go back to the other slide for 1 minute, this is what I think we all thought. I mean, I didn't hear what FAST was predicting. We all thought that it was going to be our youngest learners who were going to struggle the most. Learning how to read virtually, learning how to read at home when we were handing out packets, right? Those are our youngest learners, right? Our youngest readers. And, to see where the 2 through 5 group is, and you look at the two winter graphs, the fact that we're pretty much in line, those kids all were able to catch up. Our youngest learners, our early readers, are the ones who we thought were going to struggle the most, and it's been the case.
Do you have the data for like the particular classes, like if you did, rather than having like the second one, the range of 2 through 5?
Yes, we have it by data. We have it broken down by building, and
I would assume like the 2 through 5, like it's diluted by older who probably didn't lose as much.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yep.
Yes, it was really great to look at our 3 through 5 data, because really the kids held on to the learning that they had. And it was really in the primary area in in first and second grade that you really saw that learning slide, because they were learning how to read when they left school and school was interrupted, and just you can't learn to read from a packet. So that's really when you'll see a lot of the students who we've invited to the program are in that. We know next year when we're looking at our students, we have to really worry about the kids who are in second and third grade, because some of the third graders have foundational gaps from that time that we still have yet to make up. So that's where our emphasis and our focus is going to be. Right, so moving ahead, whoops, did I go?
So we're going to have some program objectives and an evaluation, obviously, here. The basic objectives, now that you've heard about the data which drove this, is to bridge the gaps in ELA and math proficiency due to COVID-19, and to provide additional reading and math support for students who normally, you might have caught this in Jen's piece, normally would have received it during the regular school year. But of course, as you know, we've pulled our specialists to run classrooms. We're looking to evaluate this using spring, actually it might not be spring 2000, well yeah, we are going to use spring 2021 data, fall 2021 data, and winter 2021 FAST data to be able to compare between the graphs that you've seen as well as the data that we will get in the upcoming year and later this school year. Spring 2021 was. Selected families were surveyed to determine interest. We sent out a survey 2 weeks ago, I believe, and to a selected group. And the selected group was virtual program K through 5 students as of March 2021, and regular program K through 5 students identified as high risk by FAST. Just so you know, a little postscript to that, we actually have sent out a subsequent letter of interest. We've received, I believe, 104 yes, we want to participate in this program out of approximately 495 notices that we sent out. So we've sent out a subsequent letter of interest, and this time it's a physical letter that we put in kids' backpacks. I believe that was today or tomorrow.
Yes.
So we're going to see how that comes back. Anyhow.
So the program is going to be at West Street because of a lot of the capital projects that are going on. That is the building that has the rooms that are available without construction going on. And we are going to be able to have 24 sections there, up to 360 students. We could do 4 grade, but if you look at the students who look at our data, we might have a lot of classes that are first grade classes and a lot of classrooms that are second grade classrooms. Of those 24, it really is all going to depend on the survey and the kids, what grade levels when they identify when they come back. But we did send a lot of letters to first graders, a lot of letters to second graders. So I would expect that we would have more sections of those grade levels. The program's going to run from 8:30 to 11:45. We're going to spend 2 hours on ELA, given our data, and about an hour on math a day. The program will run from July 26th through August 19th, as Jeff said, Monday through Thursday, and Friday mornings are going to be PD for teachers. So what we're doing is we're running this as like a lab site where we're really going to do intense PD on accelerating students. We're going to do that the week before the program starts. And then as we go, we're going to be analyzing the data, looking to see where are the students struggling, and then meeting on Fridays to really break that apart and say, okay, what can we do next week to adjust for that, to try and accelerate the students as quickly and as fast as we can in this 4-week program. So we'll have a week of PD for teachers prior to the program.
That's really good. We're going to be offering breakfast and lunch for free, of course, to all the students. Some basic information on staffing. We're going to be having 2 data integration specialists who are going to be leading. Is it correct for me to say they'll be leading the PD and those smaller conversations? And we're also going to be utilizing them for instructional purposes, I believe in small groups throughout. We're going to look for, we are potentially looking for a social worker. We are going to have a nurse and clerical support, up to 24 teachers, principal, and depending on the students that enroll, perhaps ENL support, depending on the students sign up. We were investigating transportation. I believe that we will be able to run transportation for these kiddos, which is really exciting. And instructional materials, like what Jen was referencing, teachers' college summer school units with trade books, professional development. Am I correct in putting it this way, that the professional development, the instructional materials are going to help the teachers bridge the previous grade level to the new grade levels that we're targeting appropriately?
Yeah, and then it'll be aligned to the instruction that they'll have in the fall. And the professional development that teachers will participate will be from Teachers College.
That really is, that's the program. Any questions about this whatsoever?
Just one statement first.
Yeah.
Remember, we know that we have federal funding coming in that's particularly for this. However, not knowing when that funding is coming in, we are able to utilize some grant money for this. So we've planned a way to utilize our current funds to do this, not knowing when and how specific the funding expectations will be for the federal funding. So we have a way to spend this within our current constraints.
It's not going to lead to any cash flow problems come fall.
No, not at all.
Right.
Great question, but no. And that's because we got some big payments and
Right.
back payments.
Any other questions from board members on the summer plan?
Yeah, you said that the virtual students were assessed. How was that done?
Well, that is a great question. Some of those assessments are computer-based. So the computer-based ones, the students took at home over their computer. So that was an easy one. The early ones are ones where you actually have to sit next to a teacher or on a screen with the teacher and read. So we used our building-based subs that we have to do some of the kindergarten assessments where they would project something to the students at home and then the students would read. Yeah, there were some of the ones in the early ones with the kindergarten that we couldn't do in the fall because the kids actually had to have something that they were touching. But the last round for kindergarten, we were able to assess all our kindergarten students. And our virtual teachers have started to be very creative where they've started to be able to do running records as they've gotten really super good with technology and fluent with that. They've been able to pick up and do a lot of the assessments that we've been able to do in the classroom virtually as well. It just takes time.
And we are concerned, as you might expect, about, how valid, that is when someone's taking those assessments at home, if there's been any support or help. And sometimes you don't even realize that you're giving real help, right? Just because you're rereading it or something like that, that a student who was being assessed in person with a teacher might not get that support. So we certainly believe that there's error in that. And if you think about this, and as they mentioned, like in some of the national data, remember, there's a lot of kids who haven't been in at all. So their only assessments have been this way through the same system, which is just interesting.
How does the FAST data correlate with state standards, like the benchmarks that the kids may have already had? So obviously it's showing a deficiency, but are we going to end up saying, hey, we're at this level and then they take the state assessment and they're not at that level?
Yeah, they're designed, the benchmarks are designed to correlate with the state and be predictive of the state assessment level. And we switched to FAST last year. And then the years prior to that, we were using STAR. So we don't have that data in-house to look and see, to say, okay, it does line up, but typically those national ones that benchmark do line up with our state data that we have. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, and then if I might segue to Mr. White, we are also having a program at the high school, an after-school Apex program where we are going to be working with certain groups of kids. So Mr. White, if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Well, we're going to try something that hasn't been done at the high school. It's modeling a summer program where a student would take a full year of courses. If they weren't successful, they would go to summer school and remediate the course. What we're looking at is saying that a student that hasn't been successful in quarter one or quarter two and had a failing grade, we want to begin that process right away. And we want to use the Apex Credit Recovery Program. So that student that's failed maybe algebra and got a 50 first quarter, 50 second quarter, we want to provide the opportunity to work through the Apex program. And the Apex program it's a prepared program. Students independently work through the program. The test, the assessment is generated by Apex. The student works through the program. When they're successful, we would elevate that grade to a 65. If the student had a 50, we elevate to 65. If it's less than 50, we elevate to 65. It gives them a fighting chance before the end of the year comes to be successful and earn a passing grade in the course. We know the best source for remediation is actually the teacher of record. And our teachers they know they can go back and open up their quarter one and quarter two grade at any time. So they're also working with students to remediate things that didn't go well earlier in the year. And if the teacher is working with the student and the teacher is helping that student, the student turns in that work, we're actually going to elevate that grade to whatever the teacher thinks is appropriate based on the work. So we're trying to hit it from two different perspectives: the teacher of record working with the student and also the Apex program. That's how we're going to try and pull this off. Hopefully get more to the finish line and see more students successful before the year ends.
And just one comment on funding there as well. We do already have Apex licenses. This would be, we probably have to add some Apex licenses here for students. Again, we could do that through some of our grant monies.
Is that a service you purchase through BOCES?
Apex, the Apex licenses do, Allison, do the Apex licenses actually come through BOCES? We get,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
they do. So we get
So it's
aid on
aidable.
those. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to share, what's coming around is a draft of a letter that we've prepared to go home to our Algebra 1, English 11, Earth Science, and Living Environment students. The state has canceled geometry, Algebra 2, chemistry, physics, global studies, US history, but those other exams still need to be provided to students. So what we're doing is where a student who has a passing 4-quarter average can be exempt from the exam. They can choose to take the exemption and the E will appear on their transcript. That student, however, can sit down and challenge the exam. If they sit for the exam, the grade they earn on the exam will go on their transcript. That student, however, has the option, if they're not happy with the grade, to take the exemption in its place of the actual grade. If the student's grade on the exam, that numeric grade, is higher than their 4-quarter average for those 4 courses, we'll substitute that higher Regents exam grade for the 4-quarter average. So we haven't done that in the past, but we're offering that to students who are currently passing a Regents course. A student failing a Regents course can't earn the exemption, but they can come in and sit for the exam. If they pass the exam, they'll earn that Regents credit. The grade appears on their transcript, and we'll replace their failing 4-quarter average with that exam score. So we're doing the state has provided us multiple opportunities to help students achieve passing grades. If a student has a failing course grade in a Regents course and doesn't pass the exam, they can go to summer school. And in summer school, in that 5-week, 2 hours a day for a course, if they pass that local piece that's being provided for those courses, they pass it, they'll earn the exemption on the Regents exam. So there are a whole lot of safeguards that are being built in to help students achieve Regents credit for these 4 courses. John, you have a
No, I
question?
had a question about the program, the Apex program itself.
Okay.
Is it student-driven, staff-driven? Is it small group? Is it?
What we're doing is we're going to any student that has a 51st quarter, 52nd quarter. We have their names. We're going to be reaching out to them to see if they're interested. Those students that are interested are going to be contacted, and we're going to make every effort to get them enrolled in the Apex program. The teacher that works with them in the Apex program is there, one, to facilitate, to help them move from module to module, to assist them with the technology side of it, to answer questions and assist them to get through it. It's not a direct teaching model, but it's more of a facilitator model to help the kids.
Okay. With the Apex, is there assessments that go along with it?
There are assessments built right into the program. So you do a topic, you do a section, and there's a test at the end of it. And when you're successful, you can move on.
And you have to complete each one to move on?
Yes.
It's not just
Yep.
do this, doesn't really matter how you do, and then
Nah, it doesn't work that way.
Correct. You have to prove proficiency.
Everybody good?
Just a question with taking the Regents exam design. I know in your letter, it states that students have, when it deals with the endorsements and the diploma type.
Yep.
So let's say someone is going for they want the advanced distinction with honors.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still required to have, because I've been on the state website, it says they still have to have 3 tests.
They have to have 3 tests, but there are safeguards built in for each of those exemptions. Depending on how long the exemptions exist, they will modify that criteria to earn that.
All right. So would you recommend someone attempt the exam? They don't do well, take the exemption. If not,
If you're passing the course, I would say go for it. We don't know what the exam is going to look like. Suspicion is the exam isn't going to change dramatically from one year to the next.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that the index that helps with the curve on the exam isn't going to be, maybe it's greater this year than it's ever been in the past. It doesn't hurt a student who's passing the course to take the exam, because the fallback is they can always accept the exemption. The student that's failing the course, Absolutely, give it a shot because you
Right.
never know what's going to happen.
Well, the question that I posed to the superintendent today came in from someone who has the kid has like a 98 average in earth science. You know, obviously you don't want to take the exam and hurt that, you know, when you have such a high grade, when you can get that as your average.
Yep.
But in this situation, though, if they, let's say they took the exam, got a 70 on it, they could say, I'm going to take the exemption instead
That's correct.
and still keep the 98.
Yep.
It won't hurt them. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
You doing finance right now?
No?
Oh, I went past that.
You were gonna skip us, huh?
Yeah, I was. Allison asked me to.
I believe it. I believe it. Okay, thank you. We're here tonight to is really a follow-up to the video that we put out to the school community regarding reopening and the reopening plan. There's an expectation that districts look into modifying the plan because the plan is to get all students back. However, there's some bumps in the road when it comes to getting all kids back. And there's some criteria that have to be met in counties to get all kids back. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. Just so you understand, the plan is this. We need to be able to upload our plan, our amended plan, which is going to be this PowerPoint, to our website to say here's what we've done, or here's what our plan is. Okay, so we'll go through that now.
For in-person instruction changes due to the Department of Health's update, which was the Friday prior to last on the 9th, the priority obviously is to return all students to 5-day instruction. Made that very clear in the document. The district should obviously cohort students to the extent where practicable. Classroom distance may move from 6 feet to 3 feet as per alignment with the CDC guidelines. In a county with a high transmission rate, which we are, middle school and high school must maintain 6 feet of distancing. Also must maintain 6 feet between adults and students, and also while eating meals, snacks, and consuming fluids, lunchroom areas, snacks, so on and so forth. Masks are now required at all times except for meals. So that is a little bit of a subtle change where they actually put in at all times, a little bit of a difference from the original document.
So no more mask breaks.
Essentially no more mass breaks. So we're going to
We're still
continue
looking
on.
into that. We haven't made an adjustment to that yet.
We're going to continue on until otherwise noted.
All right.
Screening.
And I say that because there's some ambiguity in the language in this document. You know, there's whenever possible, strongly recommended. So, you know, we're looking into it, to a little bit of that a little further.
Screening, daily surveys, cleaning protocol, all of that will remain the same. So no change there. We'll continue to do the weekly screen as we do, surveying of students, temperatures, so on and so forth at the doors. Another big change, music and PE activities have been altered from what was 12 feet to now 6 feet of distancing. So that does help with projection and music programming, as well as participation in physical education.
Let me just make one comment, then you can do this slide here. But one thing on the question that was asked about masks too. Understand this, without question, we know that these have worked in our buildings. We know that while at 6 feet wearing the masks, we have not seen transmission. To date, and Mr. Stack will tell me if I'm wrong, but we believe we probably have one case where it's been transmitted from person to person in our district. And that was adult to adult when masks weren't being worn in a lunch area. Any other situations where we've known multiple kids have had it, it's almost always, and in no cases do we know that it's come from us within our school. It's been functions that happened outside of school, sleepovers, get-togethers, parties, you know, those sort of things. So we know that these are working for us, but they've been working for us even with the breaks. Okay, because we've had the kids separated. So we'll talk a little bit more about the
Yep.
plan at elementary in a minute.
I agree. So the question is, how does this impact us here at Niagara Wheatfield? You know, the K-5 program will not be impacted. You know, we've been here all 5 days, except for those first 2 weeks of school. And as Mr. Lalonich alluded to, certainly we've had, I think, a great deal of success with that. Great credit to our entire school community for making that happen. The ability to return to the 6 to 12 program, however, to 5 days, it's really determined by that rate of transmission that I spoke of in that first slide. We did apply 2 links that will be visible to the public. Those are active links, basically showing the CDC tracking by county, so you can look at the rate of transmission and keep a close eye on that. Right now, where I believe we're at about 3.5 times the level where we would have to be to bring secondary back, and that's of today's numbers. The CDC recommends that the school evaluate total new cases per 100,000 persons in the community with the preceding 7 days, and using the data from that with a percentage of molecular tests that are positive. So a case of a low-level transmission it would be 0 to 9 cases. Moderate would be 10 to 49, substantial 50 to 99, and then high is over 100. And the percentage of positive tests in those past 7 days, low being under 5%, moderate 5 to 7.9%, substantial 8 to 9.9%, and then high is over 10%. We're still, you know, certainly over that threshold.
So if you go to the next slide, you can't be in either high transmission criteria. There's 2 indicators. You can't be in the high transmission zone in either if you, and we'll show this in a minute, if you want to move from 6 to 3 feet at the secondary level. Okay? And just to give you an idea, and this is what Mr. Stack was talking about, if you look at that first indicator, that's the one right now that's really problematic. If you have over 100 cases per 100,000, population in Niagara County, a little over 200,000. If you look at that number, we've been for over a 7-day period at about 2.5 times, between 2.5 times and at our worst, like 5 times that number. Okay. So the likelihood of dropping below 100 per 100,000 for this year, I think is very slim. Okay. The likelihood isn't good. And that's not me, the superintendent, saying that. That's our health director saying that, right? Going back to, just to give you an idea, going back to February when we had some really low numbers and some really low percentages, we still weren't there. At that time, we were still about 2 times what that limit is. Okay. Now, I do hope and expect that as, you know, the number of people that have been vaccinated changes, as these criteria continue to be looked at, there are certain numbers within that population that may be able to be extracted that can help lower that number. And those are things that I know directors in New York State are talking about with health directors with the state health department. Okay. So I don't want to make it sound like, geez, are we going to, does this mean we're definitely in the same place when we get back in September? I hope not and don't think so, but we'll see. Okay. If you go to the next one. So if you're in that high transmission area, what it really means is if you look, middle school and high schools that can use cohorting, then they can go to 3 feet. You can't cohort in a high school. Okay. We don't cohort in middle. Schools that cannot use cohorting, at least 6 feet of distance between students in classrooms. So what does that mean for us, right? If knowing what we know about, especially that one indicator, here's what it means. Next. We had to set up a timeline, and Mr. Stack will go through that.
So we set up a timeline. After we got the information, we assessed some of the new information that came out on April 9th and Monday, April 12th. On the 19th, we met with the Continuity of Learning Committee, both elementary, secondary levels, and the committee provided input on the updated reopening plan. Obviously, we're here this evening with you to discuss it. This will be the exact way that this PowerPoint will be the way that we share it out with the community on our webpage, through our feed and so on and so forth, to make sure that our entire community is able to view it, see it, and assess the changes.
And a lot of this information, of course, is redundant. We did share this out in a video with a PowerPoint to families.
Correct.
So at the elementary level, our regular classrooms, we will move from 6 to 3 feet only when we need to. We don't need to rearrange all of our classes, so we won't. But what this does mean is if we have a kid who comes into one of the classrooms and we're at what would have been the max for that classroom, we can slide another desk in there because we have the ability to go to 3 feet. But we're going to stay at 6 wherever we can. Why wouldn't we at this point, right? Because we've already surveyed our families, said who's interested in coming back. So we're very comfortable with that. One of the changes that will happen is in PE music, we're able to shift from 12 feet to 6 feet apart. That'll allow some additional things to happen in those two classes. Okay.
Are we still around 20% for the people who want remote?
Yep. Overall, we're right around 20 still. Yeah. Yep. There was very little change in this last move that we made.
There wasn't any of the grade level that had a larger influx of people coming back or anything like that, or?
We actually had a few more kids coming back to elementary than going out, and couple more, not many, going out than coming in at secondary, right?
But you didn't have to move anyone at 3 feet yet. There's no classrooms that you had to.
I don't believe so. But here's what I anticipate us doing. If we had a kid, we're not moving everybody to 3 feet. We might have a student within 3 feet of 2 students, right?
Right.
We'd put a desk on the end, and we would leave all the rest at 6.
I'm just saying where you had to reconfigure anything in the classroom, put an extra desk in or anything like that.
No, I think we did some things in those rooms that we're able to now. The other one that was up there, should have been up there, was art. So you can do art, PE, and music, right? At the high school, middle school, here's where it's different. We feel like we needed to set a drop dead date here, okay? Our desire would be to be able to get everybody back before the end of the year. But if we don't have 7 days in a row of us being below that 100 per 100,000 threshold, and we don't do that by May 15th, then we're not going to come back. Okay, we won't bring them back. We're not going to do it the last couple of weeks. Remember, we're jumping into June, early June. We're into exams. We're just, it doesn't make sense. But if we can get 7 days in before May 15th, we will do a week with middle school, and then the next week we'll do the high school. High school is where we're seeing our highest numbers. Okay. So that's how we return to 5 days of instruction. Okay. At the secondary level. I already told you what I think. I don't think it's really going to happen, but this is our plan. We're ready to do it. I'd love to see it. I'd love to have an opportunity to try it, to show that it will work. We know that our elementary has, with all the kids that have wanted to be back, has been working, but it's been working because of the masks. It's been working. So, PE and music at the secondary level can also go from 12 to 6 feet.
Just one other thing to go to your question on the moving of desk, to that 3 feet. The quarantine measures still have stayed the same from the county. So we're still at the 6 feet, the 10 consecutive minutes. So that's why we would aim to, if we have to make a shift like that, maybe only shift a desk or two, if we have to. Those did not change to 3 feet for the consecutive 10 minutes. They stayed at 6. So obviously we're cognizant of that.
That's a great
just
point.
just in
Well, I'm
case.
assuming if it's like one desk going in or two, you're going to proportionally move things. So it's,
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
But it's only gonna
Position-wise.
affect a few,
it's
but,
not like,
you know,
hey, we're putting one in. Let's everyone go to
Correct.
3 feet real
But
quick.
I gotta tell you, great. But the question's a good one. But one of the things that we talked about was, did we want to, just for the sake of a more normalcy, put them back together? And the answer was no, because if we do it, one kid goes out, we could have 4 around them also out too,
More in the ring going.
because they didn't move the quarantine from 6 to 3 when they moved the distancing. So
Right.
that was just
Yeah.
why we've talked about it internally, but in the end, it just didn't make sense.
Obviously, our ultimate goal, we want the kids back. We want to be back with them, and we want to be back to full in-person instruction September of 2021. And the best way to do that is just continuing to ask for help. Some of the ways to help are the obvious things: wearing a mask at all times in our buildings, remain socially distant whenever possible, both on site, obviously, and off site. Be cognizant of the surroundings that you're in, the gatherings, especially outside of school, that our community and our students are participating in. Avoid those congregate settings whenever possible. And of course, just for our parents, please, you've been doing such a great job. Please continue to transport when possible. It helps keep the numbers in check for transportation, and keeping that part good too for our numbers. So that's one thing that we would like to stress.
And to just two additions to that. One is, clearly it's not over. There's a local high school, and I'll tell you, our BOCES, the superintendents, because those are the people I meet with, they want to be here and they want to be back full. Okay, everybody's feeling that same way. One of our local high schools had to close their high school because of a party from over the break, where many of their high school students were at a gathering, and a large number of them ended up with it. They closed down their high school. So just keep that in mind, as far as the large gatherings. Number two, if we're going to do the best that we can as a superintendent's group to build a roadmap for return for September. And we're going to work very closely with our Director of Health in Niagara County, Director of Health in Orleans County, to try to come up with a plan that can be supported. Because if you look at the document that put out by the Department of Health, there's an expectation that we work with, as we have been all along, our health departments for a plan. I don't expect them to do anything that flies in the face of the New York State Department of Health. Okay, they have jobs on the line, right? However, if we can find ways within those guidelines to come back in a safe way, that's what we're going to do. And so that's something that we're putting together. Hopefully we'll have a roadmap in place by June. We've even talked about probably after we get a plan in place, bringing back the board presidents together to talk about it as well with the superintendent group. We had one of those meetings prior to this past school year, and we think that could help. So that's where we're at. I think that's probably the last. Any questions?
Yeah, just with the situation as it is there any more thought on any sort of way to get more at-risk students back, maybe full-time? I don't know if there's any extra spaces in any of the classrooms, or if they're maxed out, or if there's a way.
You're saying at the secondary level.
Yeah, the secondary level, yeah.
So you're talking about getting some kids help who are struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would say is this: the one of the ways to do that, and Mr. White talked about it earlier. Those kids that are here every other day, if they're if they're in the hybrid, obviously if they're not here at all, right, that's a different story. But if they're here in the hybrid, every other day they're here after school, we will have supports for them. And if they're failing classes, they could utilize Apex, and they can certainly work with their teachers as well.
Well, I guess people have trouble with the hybrid because of the technology. I don't know how much help Apex is, if that's heavily technological.
Well, the difference would be they would be doing it here with support.
Right, every other day still, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I didn't know if there's space or any other arrangements that can be made to get these students that are really struggling to get back full time.
So you're saying a student who's here
as
2
a
days a
unique
week
group,
needs,
yeah.
whose parents want them to be every day, is there a way of fitting them in to that model? Yeah, that's what you're asking.
Yeah. No, that's not what we're looking at. You're with a cohort group, right? You're with your different black or red team every other day. So you'd be mixing them in with another group. And we certainly would be concerned about that.
Well, I think the new guidelines from the CDC, what was adopted from the state, from the CDC, actually made it more difficult to possibly do that. with
yeah,
the,
I mean,
needing the cohorts if you brought them in.
They've really continued to push cohorts. They continue to push not bringing additional people into the building. You know, those things are still a big part of this, the current document. I mean, that hasn't changed. And making sure that we don't do anything where we can't be open at all is something that we have to consider. And to high school students especially are the students that we're seeing go out the most frequently, right?
Mhm. I think the other question to piggyback on there that we've gotten from the public was, well, why are we not doing where if it, instead of asynchronous days, you're just streaming your class live, letting kids join like that every other day, so that there is live instruction. You may not be in person. I think that's the other biggest thing we get here from the community members right now with that.
Yep.
And so, what about, you know, as a trade-off for Jay, and I guess, you know, a solution for that piece is that been talked about possibly?
It's been talked about. We think there's real challenges with that as well. You know, instead of having your, I don't know if you have 25 kids, right? Instead of having 10 in front of you and 3 that you're trying to work with also at home, now you have 20 in front of you and you're trying to work with 6 or 7 at home.
Well,
You know,
I mean, but if Jason's question was based on at risk, you know, the higher at risk students, what about if that was, you know, where you don't bring everyone back, but, you know, teachers are deemed you at risk, 1, 2 others.
so they'd hear the same
Yeah, they're
instruction the
teaching
next day.
same thing.
I forgot that piece.
Yeah,
Mhm. I mean, there are other districts that are doing
sure.
that,
Yep.
where you're
Oh, I
at
know.
home 2 days
Yep.
and in person 2 days.
And they're off on a day,
Mhm.
which we're not.
Right.
So, you know, our students who choose to be here, right?
Right.
Not the students who are remote, are getting 2.5 days of in-person. Where there's a lot of districts who are getting 2. So
Honestly,
far
like,
from perfect.
I feel like the red team has kind of gotten, like, they seem to get hit with all of the asynchronous days. Like, I looked back on the calendar, the red team has not had a 3-day week since the beginning of March.
What are the numbers though total?
I will say in the first semester, after our calendar was developed
Yeah,
and the asynchronous days were identified, yeah, the red team did lose a little bit of time,
they did.
but we had a chance to reset the second semester
I
schedule.
did see that for May,
So
but I'm
it's-
just saying, like, you've lost weeks.
But they did, did it end up balancing pretty
We-
close,
we-
right? I think you,
Yeah, it came real close to balancing.
Okay.
By the time the year ends, yeah.
I just know that's been a huge complaint that I have heard, that it
Sure.
seems like that particular team has been hit the most. I don't know.
Mhm.
And I agree, because my kids are a red team. So like I said, I went back and looked. They have not had a 3-day week since the beginning of March.
There were a couple of times because of vacation days.
Right.
Where it seemed very spread out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it will be, I know in May, it seems like they have 3-day weeks. But again, like I'm saying, when you lost all those weeks in a row and then you try to cram them all in, doesn't, I don't know. I know you guys are doing the best. Everybody's doing their best. That is not a dig
No, no,
at
no, it's-
anybody,
it's-
but
right.
I do,
Right,
that is my
we-
number one question too, is why are our kids not streaming those 2 other days like the other district? Not every district, but
Sure.
other districts.
What else?
Anything else from anyone else? All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, residents' comments, any residents that speak? All right. I'd like to call for motion to accept the consensus agenda as submitted.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any item to discuss or anything to vote separately on? I had a question as I was looking through because we have the larger number of the parochial school transportation requests. How has that been affected with the social distancing size of, for transportation reducing? Have we been using more buses for parochial, or is it just, have we doubled up?
No, those typically those bus runs are smaller.
Okay.
They tend to be smaller to begin with. So I haven't heard that we had to add there.
I'm just looking at the numbers on here.
I know that
obviously-
we're more full than we normally
Yeah.
are.
But that's what I'm saying. These numbers look higher than previous years.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if we're,
Well, You know, I think sometimes that has to do with when they come in because we have ones that'll come in later. You know, I think we got a
I think this is the most I've seen at one time. Yeah, that's why I'm like,
Well, it's because the cutoff is.
Yep.
That's why you're seeing.
This
Yeah,
is
but
usually
I've
what
never
we see,
last
but
year-
even this year, it seems like a little larger
Yeah,
number.
yeah,
All on time, all at once.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor then of accepting the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries. Personnel items, I'd like to call for motion to accept the personnel report as submitted. I'll move it. All right. Jay moved it and Bob seconded it. I'd separate number 1. Anything else to discuss or separate? All right, all those in favor of accepting items 2 through 6, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries. All right, item 1, I'll turn it back to the superintendent.
And I will turn it over to Mr. White.
It's certainly my pleasure to introduce to all of you a Niagara Wheatfield graduate, Lindsay Turner. Lindsay has been serving the students, teachers, parents, and community in North Tonawanda for the last 12 years. The past year and a half, she's been working in the capacity as a TOSA, teacher on special assignment, as an administrator in the district. Lindsay made it through 3 rounds of interviews. And in every round of those interviews, every member of those committees were certainly impressed by Lindsay. So again, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so excited, Niagara Wheatfield graduate, and very, very, very happy to be back and appreciative to this opportunity. So it's going to be a crazy September, but I'm ready to join the Falcon family again. So thank you.
All those in favor then accepting Lindsay Turner for the role of assistant principal at the high school, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed or abstaining, motion carries. Welcome back home. Congratulations. We got cookies for that, right?
There are cookies. Yeah, there's cookies in the back. So if you want to take a minute, you can do that.
Yeah, if board members want to meet her, so why don't we take a pause real quick right now and you can, go and introduce yourself. We'll reconvene at, let's say, 1:15. So 7 minutes.
Can you eat a cookie that fast?
I got to be All right, how about the policy?
There's nothing new.
It's translated. All right, ex officio student members report then.
John, okay. So the one thing I wanted to talk about today is kind of like an update on where we are with prom planning. Where we are with prom planning. We had a meeting today, just talking about all the different options, and our plan is okay. And then all the different options, and our plan is to get a survey out by the end of either this week or the very beginning of next week, but just to kind of like explain everything. So obviously, we were supposed to have our prom at Tonawanda Castle. That was scheduled last year. That was all set to go, but then that got canceled a couple months ago.
Marissa, if you want, you can just walk over to that mic over there.
Yeah.
That'll probably be easier, you know.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
So yeah, we were supposed to be at Tonawanda Castle, and then that was canceled about a month ago. Am I good? Okay. A couple months ago. So we had to like kind of come up with a whole new plan of what we want to do. So then over spring break, we went to visit a couple places, and we ended up really liking Clark's Garden Grove because they have this outdoor venue that's super nice, and it looked really pretty. We thought that was the perfect place. And at that point, the number was 250. But then last Monday, there were new guidelines that came out with graduations and proms. So that said, like for medium-sized gatherings, which is what our prom would be, that's under 500. It's 33% capacity. So the number would be 165 at this Clark's place, which is obviously not enough for our class. We're double the size of that pretty much, but we still want to do something. So Clark's is still an option, and we're getting that survey out to see where we are with numbers. And if we're above that 165, we're probably going to have to be above that 150 because we have to include chaperones and stuff. We'd have to split up the prom into 2 nights at Clark's. So that's the one option. Depending on numbers, it could be 1 night or 2 nights. And obviously you'd have to follow like the COVID guidelines, wear your mask, social distance, dancing. That's a whole nother issue. That's really, we're just gonna put that off to the side for now. But the only time your mask would be able to be off is when you're eating dinner at your table. Other than that, you have to wear it the whole time. And those are pretty much the rules with that. But we want it to be formal because it is our prom. You can get dressed up and all that stuff. So yeah, Clark's is the one option, either 1 night or 2 nights, depending on numbers, and social distance, all those rules. The other option was to have prom at the school. The one benefit to that is that you have a higher capacity. So our entire class would be able to go if all 294 kids wanted to go. And we would also want that to be a formal event. We'd get like those big white tents and decorations, and you could still dress up. We'd cater food. That prom would probably be more expensive because you're paying for all the extra decorations as opposed to just the dinner at Clark's. But that was the second option, is to do it at the school. So that's all gonna like come out in a survey by the end of this week, beginning of next week, just kind of laying out prom possibilities and everything like that, just to get numbers, maybe who's vaccinated, to see like if that helps a lot, because then you don't have to get a COVID test, just like questions like that. And if you want to go to prom, what you're interested in, those kind of things. So that was prom. And then we've also been talking a lot about graduation, and there's different options with that, but I won't go into detail with that right now. So that's everything I have to say.
Nice job.
Any questions? Student rep. So what are you personally leaning towards with the 2 options that you have said for prom?
I'm a little see, talking to the other officers, I feel like they're leaning towards the Clark's thing, and even if it has to be split. But I'm not necessarily leaning towards that because because I feel like if we can get everyone together like at this school and do it just as well, like really decorate it, get some nice lights, you can still dress up. I feel like that could also be a really good option too. So I guess it'll be nice to see what everybody, but
Mhm.
I think I'm kind of leaning towards the school option personally.
Yeah. Okay, great. That'll last for about 30 seconds, so I'll get it out quick. One of the things to consider, I know that you probably have, is the weather too, right? You would have the tents, of course, in that case. 8 o'clock should probably be going inside, right? It'd be inside and outside. Is that venue? Is it both?
It's just outside.
Oh, it's just the outside
The
part.
one thing about
Gotcha.
the Friday night that we're booked right now is there's actually a wedding going on inside, but that's completely separate. They said that wasn't an issue.
Okay.
So we're on the outside area
Got
where
it.
they have the big pavilion, and they also have like things that can come down on the side, but also leave parts open, so you still have like that cross airflow. So
Got it. So it is
rain
apples
shouldn't be
to
a problem.
apples.
The only time they said rain would be a problem was if you were going to the separate dancing thing, which I don't think that's going to be an issue if there's no dancing.
Well, no, if we had square dancing at the prom, you could keep into guidelines of having with your group and everything. I mean, that'd be a little hold down at the.
Sabo was once a caller for.
Yes, I
he's
was.
volunteering to be a caller for your.
You don't go through North Tonawanda schools without learning how to call square dancing.
Or
Or
Tonawanda.
Tonawanda.
That's true. Yeah, but you volunteered,
Is this
not
for
me.
real?
Yes. And a tradition we have, Tonawanda is the same thing. There's a hoedown right before Christmas every year.
Before Christmas?
Yes.
What's the connection?
Nothing.
I don't know if that's true about Tonawanda.
He won the competition.
That I could see.
Swing your partners.
Marissa, how soon would you have to make a commitment to the other place?
Now we're already in that June 11th date. Right. But if we have more than that 150 number who would want to go to the prom, we have to get that Thursday. We wouldn't be able to do the Saturday, that wasn't open, but the Thursday that set was open, we were there, and we'd have to.
All right. President's report. As you can guess, the traditional conversation of the board presidents right now is what's going on with, CDC. That was in the guidelines. Now we saw what those came out. I can tell you that there are 2 different views of how everything should be going and who should be open and what those are. And it's split between the larger school districts and these more rural ones are not having a problem getting people back in school because when you have a graduating class of 30, yeah, I know you can fit everyone in. Obviously, I'm more in communication with North Tonawanda and Lockport and Star Point in the Falls, and with what's going on with those, and we're all in the same boat with problems of sizes and everything like that. So with numbers of students, so it's just that's normal conversation going on right now. I know if you guys have been following with NYSDOH, with the emails have been coming out, there's a lot of surveys and a lot of questions they've been asking with board members because, they're right now beginning their legislative. If you saw, they broke their legislative agenda that's usually voted on at the NYSDOH conference in October into legislative pieces and prioritizing lobbying for reopening into state ed. Obviously, many people at NYSDOH are not happy with and it's the same thing with the superintendents are not happy about the ambiguous language that comes out in these guidelines. Instead of saying you will do this, it's at the easiest convenience or the best possible way of doing it. Well, no, we want guidelines, and so they went. They've been asking for more, more clear language. Let's eliminate. Let's clarify everything. Let's eliminate the ambiguity that's in those documents right now. And I can tell you from the board president's group for NYSDOH, it's the same thing across the state. The smaller school districts are all like, let's not go forget social distancing. Let's get everyone back in the classrooms right now. Well, you can forget about social distancing because you can fit everyone in your classrooms because the one district, their entire district population was like the same as one of our graduating classes. Like, so yeah, obviously when you have 250 kids in your entire district, you have no problems with this, with social distancing. So, I mean, that's the biggest hurdle right now. So the priority, that piece, I think they're going to send out a separate vote because it's not a legislative priority that's going to deal with policy that's going to, affecting everything. I think there's going to be a member survey come out about what do we want to do with for the CDC guidelines and especially reopening in September. And that is the largest piece of conversation right now from all the board presidents across the state is not how are we ending the school year, but how are we starting the school year next year? Because I think the most people that I've talked to from across the state, their comment is, hey, there's only so many weeks left. Let's just keep things how they are. Let's not rock the ship, and let's start planning for September now. And prioritizing those things, and of course, not knowing what we're going to have. School, and that's the one thing people don't want to hear is that we're not returning to school. They want to see a plan, and like I guess the best way, and I think you alluded to this of how it is in your presentation. We want to return to school. That's what people want to hear. They want to return to 5 days a week instruction with every single kid back, and if it's someone who's not safe, across the state, let's find another program for them. That's a virtual program, and obviously, BOCES was putting something together. I think when our discussions. Are they still doing that?
Well, they currently have a program. We have. There's always been an opportunity for students who, for medical reasons, need to be home, but it's
Right.
called home hospital instruction, right? So I would imagine that would be the case. Our goal. When I say our goal would be to get back to really, normal as far as students all being here, it would be all students with those exceptions. We have an HHI program that we use if we need it.
And one of the things that they already started lobbying the state by the direction of most of the board presidents being in agreement of this was they don't want the state to come out all of a sudden in like August and say, you have to offer a virtual program. They don't want that piece all of a sudden thrown in there again. So that I think all of you are in agreement, and too as superintendents, you don't want to have to deal with that piece again too.
That's exactly right. If they make that decision, it needs to be way sooner.
Yeah. What was the term? They want to be proactive as opposed to reactive to where the pandemic is in August. So, which all leads me over to your report.
Okay, great. Thank you. First, I just want to acknowledge way back in the corner there is Ms. Biscati, and I know Marissa has spoken numerous times about some of the great work that our students are doing, our student leaders are doing with regard to engagement, pen pals with our elementary, and Ms. Biscati is one of the teacher leaders at our high school who's really been leading that, and I just wanted to say thank you for all of your work during the pandemic, during engagement. I know you're not alone, and I know you'd be the first to say that you have a mask on, so you won't. But thank you, and it's really great leadership throughout all of this. It's been so important in our district, so thanks. The CDEP committee met again this afternoon. We have 3 events coming up. We have an elementary virtual district dance party for our elementary students. It is going to be a glow dance party. Kind of with the glow sticks and all that stuff at home. We have DJ Eric. I'm not familiar with DJ Eric, but great reviews and raves about DJ Eric is what I'm hearing. We also have our Eco Campus Revitalization Project. Information will be coming out about that tomorrow in a flyer that's coming up in May. And the numbers right now, Mr. Stack, for the 5K walk/run.
we have 121 registered, and whatever balance of proceeds that we have will be going to our senior class. Marissa and company.
Great, thank you. Marissa touched on prom. We're still working through, there's at least a couple different options right now for graduation. They're working through those. Last but not least, mention every time, food service. Food is available for all of our students, both breakfast and lunch every single day. By the way, the free breakfast lunch program is in place until September 30th at this point. So we'll continue to take advantage of that. And it's one of the reasons why we're able to do it for our summer elementary program. We're able to give them breakfast in the morning and then actually send them home with a bag lunch when they leave.
Any questions, Superintendent? I just have one clarifying piece. I mentioned to you on the phone about was a chair, the rumor out there that the field turf couldn't be used. We said no to using the turf for any possible graduation piece. And it was because we couldn't put chairs on it. If you remember that, that part.
No, yeah, that's not accurate.
Okay.
Certain type of chairs can't be put on there. We have chairs that can be put on the turf, and that's what we would use if we end up going that route.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at no point were they told no to the turf at all, right?
I certainly didn't tell them no, and I don't believe anybody told them no to the turf.
Perfect.
Matter of fact, what we did is we found the right answer.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Finance.
Getting my squats in.
Gotta work the cookies off.
Yeah.
I didn't have any cookies.
Didn't have any.
You're working ours off then for us.
This is perfect. Perfect.
Here, tasty.
Okay, most of this presentation we've gone through, so we're going to go through just a few points that we want to highlight, okay? So if we could go past the first slide, the second and third slides. This one and the next one are just the executive budget. We've talked enough about that the governor's executive budget was a zero, actually less than 0% increase.
Right. This is the legislative budget, and you can see just the on this one, we're the fourth column in. The increase in the foundation aid was about $790-some thousand, just over 3% increase, versus what the governor's budget was for foundation aid was zero. So we did get a bit of an increase there.
And you'll see on the next slide, because it'll really highlight that at the bottom, you'll see the 3.73%. Really important to understand that last year, the foundation aid increase was a zero. Okay, so the 2-year average is less than 2% in foundation aid. And then you can look at all those other numbers, but the overall good news is this. This is the one area the legislature has talked about making sure that when it comes to foundation aid, that over the next two, not 21, 22, but 22, 23, 23, 24, that they are going to, by the end of 23, 24, they are going to be fully funding foundation aid. If that happens for the district, you'll see a slide. We'll show you what that impact would be. Okay.
Here it is. You can't really read it too well, but the bottom figure for 21, 22, which would be next year, if we were fully funded, would be just over 24 million versus what the current year aid is at 22 million. So there's just over a $2 million difference, which would be, paid over 2 years to fully fund. So the following year we'd get half that, and then the year after that we'd get the other half.
So if you figure this year we got at 3.73%, we got $790,000. Next year, if we got 50% of that difference, the 2.2 would be 1.1 million. And then 1.1 the next year. And that doesn't count, they've said, any escalations. So,
I have a question. So
Yeah.
if we get to fully funded, following year would stay the same?
No, they haven't talked to that, but the idea would be that they would then begin to use the formula.
Oh, okay.
Fully funding the formula each
Okay,
year.
I got you.
Good question. So the idea is that they have not been fully funding the foundation aid formula, and that's what they'd be doing. Good question.
And again, this is just going over our federal stimulus monies that we're receiving. So we get an SR2, which is also known as the CARES Act 2 money. We're getting about just over 3.2 million for that. And then an additional funding through the American Rescue Plan Act of just over 4.6 million. There are no directions yet as to how we would apply for it, and or specifics really as to how we can spend it. We have ideas based on what we were told, but it'll be an online application similar to other grants that's not up yet, but we're awaiting it. And then this just goes into a little more detail about the ESSER 2, or again, the CARES Act 2. We did get a CARES Act 1 grant effect back in November, December. Similarly, it's a combination of ESSER 2 and GEAR 2. The biggest difference is the first pot of money we got, I had to allocate a portion of those funds to our non-public students that were eligible. This I do not. They will be funded, but not through us like I did the first time. We are going to be involved still to a point because the state does not directly give money to non-pubs. It has to flow through the public school district. So probably through some sort of purchasing, we'll have to be involved some way.
Just to give you an idea, so that the second round of funding, the 3.2 million, we spent about half of that above our budget this year, because we said, for COVID related items, we spent about $1.6 million for this year. So then if you go to the next one, this is the one that is broken out. We don't know all the specifics yet. More guidance will follow, but the expectation is that we reserve some of this money, okay? And then that a really large portion of the remainder is used for credit recovery. And so when we talk about whether it's, Apex or other summer programs, or, in school next year, academic intervention services, all of those things can and should be, and it's expected that we fund programs with these funds. Okay.
It's just our tax cap calculation again, and you can see at the bottom, the tax levy limit plus the exclusions was just over $34,720,519, or 1.99%, which would be an increase of $677,004. And again, here's another look at the levy increases over the past few years. The 5 years prior to that, our increase was an average of 1.21%. Thank you.
Here's the budget to budget increase is 2.73%. Really important if you look at the next slide, because when you take out the $205,000 that's in the proposition to purchase some of our transportation vehicles for our buildings and grounds, and one for food service, you take that $205,000 out, the budget to budget increase is actually 2.46%. Even though we're paying that for those vehicles with $205,000 from the restricted reserve, we still have to count that in our expenditure budget.
It doesn't affect the levy is the point. And here's just another look at our budgeted revenues. Again, on the left, you see the tax levy at 1.99%, our pilots, and going down, rentals, BOCES refunds. And then on the right-hand side is the state aid and our impact aid, our expected impact aid. And then interfund transfers, appropriated fund balance, and the reserves that we would utilize to balance the budget.
And just as you fast forward in your head and you look at that far right-hand column, the bottom square, if you will, right where it says appropriate fund balance and those things below, those are all of the funds that we're appropriating to the budget from our reserves, okay? And the goal in future years, when you start talking about foundation aid going up, is to have to put less of our reserves to that. I mean, the number that we put for this current year was a number that we were all hesitant about, I think, as a group, when we talked about it last year. I mean, it was a high amount. We knew that this was the year you do it, but we don't want to be appropriating $4.5 million to our expenditure budget, right, from our reserves. So the foundation aid numbers, if they do come in as expected, that's going to help us appropriate a number I think most people would, and we would be more comfortable with.
And again, this is just another look at the expenditure budget and the planned revenues and the difference, and that's the amount needed to balance, which would be inclusive of reserves and fund balance. And this is just another look at our reserve reviews. If, again, if we were to utilize all of the expenditures that were budgeted this year and fully max out our expenditures, we did allocate fund balance and reserves to balance the budget in the current year. So this would be if we were, again, to max out our budget and utilize all of those fund reserves and fund balance, reserves and fund balance, I'm sorry. And this is where we would end up.
And just remember as a note that on this ballot, we have 2 new reserves. Okay, one for technology, for a $2 million capital reserve for technology, and
$3 million capital transportation reserve,
transportation, thank you. 3
because the
million.
other 2 are fully funded, so we'll be going through those.
And as a reminder, we go through about $800,000 every year when we buy 8 buses. Okay. And this is just the fiscal stress. You can see where we were when we were the most fiscally stressed in the state, and you can see where we are now. So much of that has to do with the fact that we have unappropriated fund balance and reserves. If we didn't have that, our fiscal stress rating would be a lot higher. So, I think that's it. Yeah. Questions?
Good job on getting the budget together.
Yeah.
Right, I'd like to call for motion that be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the Board of Education adopt the property tax report card as submitted. It's been moved,
I'll second.
moved and seconded. Any questions? All those in favor then please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining, motion carries. Okay, any items for board discussion right now? The one thing I wanted to bring up in talking with Dan with not knowing with prom, graduation, everything like that is that, how many of us are willing to help out whenever if they do need hands and stuff here, would we be willing to jump into things and get things going? So, are you retired? Oh, you're gonna be on the golf course with him every day, aren't you?
Probably. Lots to do. Get rid of some snow first.
That's great. That's great.
But particularly, I think if the problem is here, we obviously because of clocks being so tight with the numbers here, right? If it's here, I think you definitely have us for support and helping out, and
Great.
I'll call the square dancing, not a problem.
You do the whole guy?
she's like, I did not hear that.
Marissa, don't take that back to your.
Yeah.
Right. You got to know when to, selective hearing, I think is what they call it.
Class
Yeah.
a couple years ago, like country roads.
I think so. Yeah.
I'd like to see it though.
I still know how to Alamand, I think.
Yes, Alvan left.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Promenade. I could get right into that right now. Yeah. Any old business right now? Bring up. Did we table something for discussion last week? No, we didn't. I don't think that was. All right. Any new business at this time? Anything new to bring up? The Eco Campus and the nature trail, everything out there. I think that one of the things that you had to recontact was NWA for access to property. Don't forget that piece again.
We absolutely won't. We actually just met with Appel Osborne. They are putting together kind of an initial sketch for us. They're the landscape architects. So once we get that, because they came and walked the grounds with us, once we get that, we'll share that with the NWA group and talk about a time when we can build a little bridge over that creek.
Sure.
Neat. Yeah.
But they could be planting other stuff too. Like,
Yeah, so that's what's going to come out tomorrow. We're going to be having a tree planting. We have a bench that was donated by the Rotary, a lending library that'll go out there as well. We'll be doing a cleanup. All that'll be that same weekend.
I know the hill looks great back there. I've already been out walking, in the nicer days when it's not like this out, on a nature trail and everything. And the hill came in really good. So, you know, I might have to talk about planning stuff up there too and doing some new things.
Well, one of the ideas, and obviously we haven't got there yet because it's the first year of it, but it's really, one of the ideas was it to be a running hill.
Yeah.
too, so.
All right. Any board member comments at this time? All right. I'd like to make a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining negotiations and the employment of particular persons. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Jason. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're in executive.